how to draw realistic garden pots and containers. That's what we're doing in today's video. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we do all things watercolor, drawing tutorials like this one, even a little bit of mixed media, business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click the little bell icon, you'll get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video per week here on YouTube, and subscribing is free. So I hope you're all well today. It's absolutely freezing here in the UK. Had to use 2 kettles of water just to defrost the bird bath. I don't think we're getting snow. I think they've got snow in Scotland, and that's why I don't live in Scotland. But let's talk about today's subject. So I thought it would be good this year just to sort of really deep dive into some areas, because I've done lots of general drawing videos on this channel. But I think this year I want to go into some very specific areas, and this is going to help you to really level up your drawing skills. We're going to do the same for watercolor painting as well. And today we're going to concentrate on the sort of pots and containers, the circular ones that you might find in the average garden. Now, if I was given one subject to paint for the rest of my life and I couldn't do any others, I would certainly choose gardens, because to me there's everything there. There's every colour under the sun. You've got nature and all the botanical stuff, but you've also got interesting structures too. Now, often when I see people doing garden painting, the structures can actually let them down. And sometimes not too much thought is given to how a plant pot looks, but really it can make or break your painting. So I'm going to go through some absolute basics today. We're going to talk about perspective, foreshortening, ellipses. If that sounds horrendously difficult, I promise you it's not. I'm going to make it so easy for you to understand. And I think by the end of this video, you'll be able to draw these lovely pots and containers, and they're going to look 100% realistic, and it's really going to improve your garden painting. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to look at is what an ellipse is, why you need to be able to draw one accurately, and I'm going to give you an easy method of doing it. So let's talk about the difference between circles and ellipses. So here you can see on all of these pots we have these kind of flattened circles. They're also on the base here, and although you can't see the whole of the circle here, it does continue round inside. If it were made of glass, we'd be able to see the whole circle in the base there. And you see that as soon as we start drawing garden subjects, we're met with all of these ellipses. We've got them here and we've got them here. Now let's talk about the actual definition of an ellipse, because actually these aren't ellipses, but we're going to draw them like ellipses. So I've drawn a circle on the paper here. Yes, I did draw around something. I can't draw quite that neatly. Now, if we were to measure this, if we put a cross and we measure one way or measure the other way, taking a line through the center, I'm only doing this by eye, of course, we'd find that the vertical line and the horizontal line, or indeed any line that crossed through the center, would be the exact same length, because that's what a circle is. And then we have an ellipse. So let me draw one for you. So if I draw an ellipse, we have more of this shape. Now with an ellipse, what you have is the difference is that the vertical is much shorter here than you see with the horizontal, or it could be the other way around if the ellipse is the other way up. Now when we look at something that's actually circular like this, you can see that if we look at it sort of pretty much straight on, it's a circle, and as soon as I turn it, it starts to look like an ellipse. So from a geometry point of view, an ellipse is a completely different shape to a circle. But from the point of view of human vision, taking into account foreshortening, when we see a circle tipped on the side, we see an ellipse. So it's very important that we're able to draw this shape. And here's what people do wrong. They tend to start one side, and because they're worried about not being able to draw very neatly, they'll put maybe a dotted line. That's not the problem in itself, but then they tend to come around like this. Now what you end up with then, when you join it all up, is you end up with pointed corners. Now we've discovered that we're only seeing our circle as an ellipse. It's still a circle, and that means that it can't have any corners. It doesn't matter how deep or how shallow the ellipse is, there are no corners, and so therefore this is wrong. Now the way to draw an ellipse quite easily is to draw from the shoulder. And I'm actually standing up at this point. I'm working on a high table, and I'm moving my elbow a bit, but mostly I'm moving my entire arm rather than trying to move my hand. And you see what happens here is I end up with a line that becomes very smoothed out. Now, of course, I'll end up with multiple lines here, and then I might want to pick the one that I like the best and go round like this. And in this way, we can draw a nice smooth ellipse. Now don't worry if you draw your ellipse and it's not quite straight, it doesn't look regular or symmetrical. I'm going to show you a trick later in this video for getting that right. Now when drawing and painting gardens, it's really important to know where your eye line is. I'll explain why in a moment, but first of all let's figure out, if you're using a photograph, where the eye line of the photographer is. So finding out eye line is really important, so let me show you how to do it. Of course I'm using photographs here. If you were actually sitting painting a garden, your eye line is, surprisingly where your eyes are. But how do we find the eye line of the person who took the photograph? Well, it's really quite easy, because when you have an item like a pot like this, which has essentially a flat top, or it could be a cube as well, you can use things with flat tops also to judge where the eye line is in a photograph. Now, our eyes can't see round corners. So in other words, we can't look across and then down into something unless we actually physically go to that item, climb up on something and look down on it. Therefore, if we can see the top of something or the inside of something that has a flat top, we know that our eye line is above it. Now look at this pot here. I can look down inside it. I can see the sides going round a little bit. I can look down very slightly inside and see some of the plants and the soil. These ones here even more so, because I'm looking further down at these, so I can see inside them. Let's look at these ones in the distance. This one here, this tiny one here, appears to be almost straight. That would suggest to me that that's level with my eye line. This one here is actually curving the other way, so I can't see inside this at all. And that tells me that this is above my eye line. So let's look at this picture here. Again, we've got some clues. I can see inside the pot only a very tiny amount, but I can see the back of that ellipse, and I can see just a tiny amount into this pot. I can also look at these flat topped walls. I can see the top of the wall. I can see the top of this plinth. That means my eye line is above these things. Now, once we go off into the distance here, we have to be a little bit careful, because another way that you can see on top of a flat object is, of course, if it's tipped up. So it's possible that the background here is going uphill. So even though I can see the top of these tiny little wall pieces here, I wouldn't say that that's a definite indication that my eye line is above them, because the path could be sloping up slightly here. It looks like it is. The same goes with a rooftop. Of course, if you can see an angled roof, doesn't necessarily mean you're above it, because that roof is tipping towards you. But if you can see the top of a flat top roof, then you are above it. So let's go back to our original picture. My eye line is definitely above these things because I can see inside them. And here, even this tiny watering can, I can see inside it slightly. I can see the top of the watering can. Here we're about straight. And the same with this plinth here. Although I can see two sides of it, it appears to be almost a straight line. Here, we are definitely above the eye line because I can't see inside this at all. I can't see the back of that ellipse. So that would suggest to me that my eye line in this picture is about here. Next, let's look at how we use this knowledge of where the eye line is to determine how deep your ellipses and curves need to be. I'm going to show you how to accurately draw a pot where you're looking up at it, looking down at it, looking straight at it. It's all about the eye line. So let's talk about why this is important and how it affects the way that we draw our pots and our containers. So as we discovered, and I'm going to draw a little eye here just to indicate where we're looking. As we discovered, if we are looking at something that's level with us, an ellipse that's level with us, it's going to appear as a straight line. When it comes down a little bit in our vision, it's going to start to appear as an ellipse. And the further down it becomes, the deeper that ellipse is going to be. All well and good. So how does this affect how we draw garden pots? Well, there's one big mistake that people frequently make, and that is to draw the bottom of a cylinder or a pot on a table or on a pathway as having a flat base. So let's look at this. So if the top of the pot looks like this, and then we come down like this with the sides of the pot, what people often do is this. Now, the reason they do this is because your brain is playing a trick on you. It's trying to sort of think logically, and it's thinking, well, it's on a flat surface, so it must be flat. And although you're correct, it is flat, that doesn't mean it appears flat, because we're not looking at something that's two-dimensional like a piece of paper. We're looking at a three-dimensional object. We're looking at something that's cylindrical, that is circular, And therefore, because we know that when we look down at an object and then further down at an object that is circular, the ellipse becomes deeper. What we actually need to do is draw this curved. Not only do we draw this curved, but the ellipse at the base here is going to be a deeper curve than the ellipse at the top. Now, of course, we can't see all of that stuff inside, but what we end up with is this, and you can see now that we've got a realistic looking pot and we know that we're looking down at it. Now, what if we're looking up at the pot? We're not going to see all of this. We're not going to see inside the pot. And so the top of the pot is going to appear like this. Because not only do things become more curved as they go below our eyeline, they become more curved as they go above our eyeline too. So we've got the sides here, and then we would have the base, something like this. Now, if this pot was in a hanging basket, so in other words, it's suspended up in the air, we'll be able to see the base of it. And because as things go above the eyeline, they become more curved, this time we've got the opposite going on. So this ellipse is going to be deeper than this ellipse. Now, of course, this may be sitting on some kind of shelf or rooftop, and it may be cut from your vision. So it could appear straight at this point if it's up high, and this is obscuring your vision. So that means that you would, in that case, draw the base flat, but that's only because you can't see through the shelf or the plinth or the building that it's sitting on. If you're getting value from this video, can I ask you very quickly, please, to press the like button? What do Americans say? Smash that like button. Please do smash the like button. If you can like, comment, share or subscribe, it helps to keep my channel growing, and that helps me to make more free content for you. Now, if you understood all that, but you're still having trouble getting your ellipses actually to look neat and you're not very good at just drawing them straight, I've got a little measurement trick that's going to help you to either straighten them up or give you some guidelines for drawing them in the first place. So I've drawn an ellipse here, but I can see that it's not straight. I need to straighten it out, but I'm not quite sure how. So what we can do is we can measure. So I've got a set square here. You don't need a set square. You can use anything with a right angle, like a piece of printer paper. I'm going to place it on the base of my paper so that I know it's properly upright. I'm going to pick a spot where I think it's probably about central. Let's go here and put a line that way. And then if I try and find the center of that, I think we're about here. And then we'll do the same in the other direction. So I'm lining up the edge of my set square with the side of the paper now, and I'm taking a line through. So what this has done is it's divided it into quarters, and we can instantly see now that everything is a bit different, isn't it? This one's too small, this one's too big. So what I would do at this stage is I would pick the one that you like the best. I actually like this one the best. I think it's the smoothest. And what I'm going to do is make a little mark here, and I want to measure from here to here. Now, you don't have to use something with measurements on. You can just use a piece of paper. In other words, I can go like this and go from here to here. And then I can use this measurement here to check the width. The width isn't too bad, but it does need to come down a little bit on this corner here. I can do the same here. I can measure the depth and then the height. Again, we're not too far off. All I've got to do now is make everything look like this one. And I can start to straighten up my ellipse and get everything looking a bit more even. Now, there is a school of thought that says that you should draw a cross before drawing your ellipse. So in other words, you would draw a cross like this with the width that you wanted the ellipse to be, and then you would draw evenly where you wanted the height to be. And then you would form your ellipse around this cross. If you find it helpful, that's something you can do. I do just find, though, it does limit your ability to do that smooth drawing technique that I showed you earlier. But if you find this method easier, it's certainly a legitimate way of drawing an ellipse. Now, as well as understanding these sort of mathematical and geometrical concepts, sometimes you just need to be a little bit instinctive. I'm going to give you a simple trick that's going to help things to lay a little bit flat if they look like they're tipping up towards you. This often happens when you're drawing the top of objects. Now, sometimes it's important to be a little bit instinctive about your drawing. And if you've drawn a pot like this one here, for instance, and the top of it appears to be tipping up, so anything that appears to be tipping up towards you, what you want to do is lessen the angle or lessen the depth. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're just going to lessen the depth here. So I'm just going to take this ellipse and make it much narrower. And you'll instantly see that that top starts to lay flatter and it starts to look more realistic. This is also a trick that can be used for square objects like pathways and the top of plinths and walls. But that's beyond the scope of this video. I'll cover that in a subsequent video. Now we have an ellipse at the top of our pot, but we also have another ellipse at the base. Getting these two out of line is very common for beginners. What it's going to do is going to make your pot look kind of wonky, not like it's able to actually house any kind of plants. Using a guideline is going to sort all of this out for you. Just like with the ellipse, it can be used afterwards to straighten up a pot that's not quite straight. Or better still, it can be used in advance to give you a framework for drawing your pot accurately. Now, another thing that can cause you problems is when the ellipse at the top doesn't really line up with the ellipse at the bottom, and you end up with your pot looking somewhat wonky. So just like we used a cross on our ellipse to judge if the ellipse was okay, what we can do is we can straighten up our pot by taking a center guideline. Again, just find where you think the center looks best, and then you can drop an upright through it like this, and you'll be able to check the width here. Again, you can use a piece of paper. Look at that, it's spot on that little line there. And I can go this way. I can even, if I want to, draw straight lines across at any point. So I can take a right angle across at any point and just check the width here compared to the width here. Again, what I suggest you do is pick the side that you think looks the best. And this will enable you then to start to straighten up your pot, make it look better. But rather than doing this afterwards, it's actually better to drop a straight line down before drawing your pot. Or you could perhaps just draw the top ellipse like this, pop yourself a center guideline down. And this is going to enable you to get the bottom of your pot in line with the top and everything looking fairly symmetrical. There's no need to obsess about this because most pottery is not 100% symmetrical. But dropping a center line down is just going to help you to get things roughly the same on both sides, and it's going to make sure that the top of your pot lines up with the base of your pot, so the top ellipse is in line with the bottom ellipse. This is going to make your pot look like it could actually hold a plant, rather than the fact that it might just be sitting there defying some laws of physics. Now, when drawing pots and containers, we need to understand a little bit about foreshortening and perspective. One of the main places you're going to come up against this is when you're drawing the top or the lip around the rim of your pot. So if you have a look at this little pot I've got here, I actually keep this in my bathroom. It's got a little lid. I keep hair clips in it. But if you have a look, it's got a flat rim. Now, you may have this on a garden pot or you may have a raised rim. You'll notice that if I tip it towards you, the rim is the same width all the way around. But if I tip it like this, it starts to become foreshortened because you're looking across it. And what you'll see is you'll see less here and more here. Let me explain it with the pencil. It's going to help your pots to look more realistic. So we've seen how a circle flattens into an ellipse, but this of course is just a single line. We have thickness to pots. Some of them are quite thick indeed. And they're going to be areas on the top and on the rim where you're going to get foreshortening coming into play. So if we draw another ellipse here, and this is a rim, what you'd be inclined to do is when you start drawing the inside of the rim like this, you'd be inclined to keep the same width here all the way around. And physically, the reality of the object is it is the same width all the way around. And of course, this is what your brain's going to tell you to do, but we actually have foreshortening. So we're looking across the object slightly like this. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring these areas here a little bit closer together. So what we're going to have is we're going to have more width here than we have here. So what you need to do in this case is just make sure that you've got a little bit more width here. And then when it comes in with your eyeline here, you're going to have a narrower edge here. Let me draw that a bit more firmly so you can see it. So you're going to get this narrowing. Now you may find on some pots you have almost sort of a decorative rolled top, and you're going to find that you'll be able to draw that nicely by following that rule of having less width here and more width here and here. This is just one more thing that's going to make your pot look a little bit more realistic. Another mistake that people make, and I see this all the time with still life objects, things like vases and jars with things written on them, but I also see it with garden pots that have decorative stripes perhaps, is that they don't allow for perspective. Let me show you how to place the decorative items on your pot so they look realistic and they follow the shape of the pot rather than sitting on some other plane altogether. So I've drawn myself a nice garden pot here. I've got my centre line and it's not looking too bad at all. But what if I have some decorative bands on this pot, like this one here? What you'll find is that the bands will be wider here and narrower towards the edges. Now, why is this the case? Now, we know that things get smaller or appear to get smaller as they go away from our eyes. And because this pot is curved, this part here in the middle, this is the closest to my eyes. Once we get back here, this is going away from my eyes. So it's very slight, but this part of the pot here is closer to me than the edges are. So what does this mean? This means that we need to draw any decorative items like text or pattern so that they are a little bit wider in the middle here and they go narrower towards the sides. Notice as well how these lines here just appear to continue going round. They don't stop in a sudden hard edge. So let me show you the wrong way of doing it. So the wrong way of doing it would be to keep this flat like this. And you see also where these lines intersect with this side line, we've got a hard corner. Now we know that this band goes all the way round. It's a circle that will appear as an ellipse on the side. That means there can't be a corner on it. So when we draw our bands, we need to seamlessly match them with the sides like that so that this line would continue going around. So we're going to curve around like this. And you see that when my pencil meets this side line, it could just continue in. Of course, if the line is raised like this, the surface decoration is raised, there might be a bit of a lip there. But if not, you're going to see that that line there is going to seamlessly meet the side of the pot. And what we need to do is make sure that this decorative band is wider here and narrower here. So we can draw it like this. Now, any decoration on the band will also follow the rules of perspective. So if, for instance, we had circles, as they got away from our eyeline, they'd become more oval, more elliptical. They'd also become smaller and closer together. And you can see how much more realistic this looks than the one at the top. So always remember the rules of perspective when you're putting these decorations on. Now, if you're wondering why this one here appears more narrow in the center and wider at the sides, it's because this top is flat. So we are looking across the top in a way that we're not doing with the body of the pot itself. Did you ever do that thing at school where they made you shade an orb or a cube and you used the shading to make it look three-dimensional? We can do the same with plant pots. So let's look at shading. Now, of course, it's hugely subjective and there's an awful lot of shadows cast within a garden itself. And so it could be that your pot is completely in shadow. It could be that shadows are being cast from some other object nearby. So you always want to refer back to your reference photograph or your eyes to tell you where the shadows are. But generally speaking, you're going to get shadows inside of something. We're going to get shadow inside here, and it's likely to be deepest in the area where we can't see very well at the front here, and be a bit less shadowy here. There's likely to be shadow perhaps underneath the rim. There's likely to be a little bit of shadow anywhere that the vase itself goes in because dark areas recede. There's also likely to be shadow at the base here where it recedes away from us. And there will nearly always be a little bit of shadow down the sides. Although this could be hidden on one side and very much exaggerated on the other side if we have direct sunlight coming towards our pot or our vase. Also think about the decorative items. If they're raised, we'll get a little shadow beneath those. And of course, finally, you'll probably get some form of shadow underneath. And you can very easily start getting your garden container looking a lot more three-dimensional. Let's look now at how you tackle drawing multiple pots together, or perhaps branches and leaves crossing in front, crossing behind. How do you maintain that symmetrical structure when you can only see part of the object? This simple trick is going to sort it all out for you. Now, because most of our garden pots and containers are pretty symmetrical, it can be quite hard to fit things behind other things and keep that symmetry. So what do I mean? So imagine we have some smaller plant pots either side of this. And what people normally do is they'll try to draw around this. So they'll try to draw a pot like this and kind of figure out, how it should look being behind the other one. What you actually want to do is draw through things. So before you get to this stage of putting the shading in, if you've got another pot behind, what you want to do is pretty much ignore that first pot. So you can put your ellipse in, you can get your center line, and you can start judging how this pot looks. And you see that I'm even drawing the bit that's hidden from view. It's important that I do this because otherwise I don't know that this object is symmetrical. Now, once I'm happy with that, what I can do is go over the bit that I'm keeping a little bit more firmly. And then, of course, I'll just erase the bit that I can't see. The same happens if there are things growing behind. So if I've got a branch that's coming across, what I don't want to do is draw it here and then try and plot where it comes out on the other side. It's not going to end up looking natural. So the best way to do it is just to draw through. So I'm drawing through here, and you can keep your pencil quite light in the middle. You can almost lift it so it's barely touching the paper. If you're working in a medium or on a paper that you think is going to mark quite a lot, just sort of lift your pencil so it's just about touching. But what this enables you to do is get something that looks absolutely naturalistic. And if I wanted to have a branch that was coming off of this one, so it came out here, I'd even go to the stage of drawing it like this. And what this is going to do is just make everything look natural. You never want to stop and start drawing either side of something. Just take your pencil line straight through and then erase the part that you don't need. Now today, I want you to let me know in the comments if you like this style of video, if you like deep diving on one particular element of your drawing, of your painting. And also let me know what other subjects you would like me to cover, either in drawing videos like this or in other media. I always take your feedback into consideration when designing the content for this channel. And before you leave this video, don't forget to look in the video description. I've got lots of free stuff down there for you. I've got some free downloadable PDFs. There's even a free watercolor painting course that you can take for zero money whatsoever. You can also find out about all of my paid courses. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you've also watched my 20 fast drawing tips. It's going to level up your drawing skills incredibly quickly. You can watch that video right now.